You ever have one of those moments where your gut tells you something's wrong, but you push it aside because you don't want to believe it? Yeah, that was me a month ago. Just a regular guy trying to make a marriage work. My name's Matt. I'm 38. Been married to Melissa for 8 years. No kids, just us, a modest home in the suburbs, 2 dogs, and what I thought was a peaceful, balanced life. I work from home, run a mid-sized web design agency. Nothing flashy, but enough to give us comfort. Melissa worked in marketing, frequent meetings, deadlines, sometimes late nights. Nothing unusual. That's how our dynamic always worked. We trusted each other, gave each other space. Or at least I did. The funny thing is, there wasn't a single huge red flag at first. No lipstick on the collar or secret texts. It started with little shifts. Her sudden habit of sleeping with her phone under the pillow, the way she avoided eye contact when I asked about her day, the quick dismissals like, just the usual, followed by a fake yawn and a retreat to the shower. But the weirdest thing? She'd stop mid-conversation to check her notifications, smile, and then tuck her phone away like she was guarding nuclear codes. You don't have to be a genius to know something wasn't right. I just didn't want to admit it. Not yet. Melissa had always been emotionally distant, more practical than affectionate. But lately, it was like I was living with a ghost. She'd leave early for work, come home late, and barely even say goodnight. No fights, no screaming, just silence. That's what killed me the most. Silence. You can't argue with silence. It just wraps around you until you choke. 3 weeks ago, I remember we were having dinner, chicken and rice, nothing special, and she looked up and said, "Matt, I think we need to redefine what this marriage means." Just like that. No preamble. No emotion. I didn't know what to say. I blinked at her, chewing slowly, waiting for her to explain. But she didn't. "What does that mean?" I finally asked. "It means, I want to feel something again," she said. That line stuck with me. Like I was some emotionally bankrupt robot who didn't provide her with the thrill she craved. But I didn't push it. I just nodded, said we could talk more about it later. I didn't want to seem clingy or insecure. Stupid, right? Later that night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her steady breathing, and I knew, deep down, I wasn't the only one in her life anymore. But I didn't do anything. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed to know that what I felt in my bones wasn't just paranoia. And that's how this whole thing started. A quiet suspicion. A small shift. A gut feeling that wouldn't let me sleep. What I didn't know was just how deep the rabbit hole went. The next morning, I woke up alone. Melissa had already left for work, which wasn't surprising. What caught my attention was her perfume. The scent lingered in the air like she'd sprayed it right before walking out the door. It was her expensive one, the one she only wore on special occasions. I stood there staring at the empty bed, then looked down at the clothes she'd left tossed in the hamper. She wasn't dressed for a normal day at the office. She'd chosen one of those tight pencil skirts, the kind that hugged her body in a way I hadn't seen in months. That skirt had been buried in the back of the closet for over a year, but somehow it made its way into rotation again. I don't know why that made my chest feel tight, but it did. I didn't want to assume the worst, so I tried to distract myself with work. I opened my laptop, answered emails, scheduled a few meetings, even took a call with a client who wouldn't stop talking about the new interface I'd built. But even while I nodded and smiled, my eyes kept flicking toward the clock, and my mind kept going back to that skirt. At some point, I gave up pretending to care about CSS or plugin integrations. I opened the shared calendar on our phones. She hadn't marked anything for today, which was odd. She always blocked off her work events. Every single one. I checked the traffic app and typed in the name of her office. Light traffic. It would take her 15 minutes to get there. Yet she had been gone for over 2 hours already. I didn't want to be that guy. The kind of guy who snoops through his wife's phone or stalks her location. But it didn't feel like snooping if something inside me was screaming that this was necessary. I sat there for another 10 minutes debating it. Then I grabbed her tablet from the nightstand drawer, the one we both used for Netflix. I knew it had her Google account synced. I tapped through until I reached her location history. At first, nothing loaded. Then, a dot appeared, an address downtown. It wasn't her office. It wasn't anywhere near her office. I copied the address and typed it into a Maps app. It was a residential building. A condo, actually. She was there now. I stared at the screen and felt a tight knot form in my gut. I didn't want to believe it, but my hands moved without thinking. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and left. The drive there was a blur. I didn't even turn on the radio. I just stared straight ahead, numb, locked in. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I needed to see something. Anything. To confirm what I already suspected. When I arrived, I parked 2 blocks away and walked. The building had a small lobby with glass doors. I waited across the street, watching. Nothing happened for 10 minutes. Then the elevator opened, and there she was. My wife. Walking out with some guy? He was taller than me, clean-shaven, wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, trying too hard to look casual. They were laughing. She touched his arm while they talked, and he placed his hand on her lower back as they walked past the glass doors. I don't even remember taking the video. I just remember pulling out my phone, zooming in, and hitting record. Her smile was real. Her face had more life in it than I'd seen in months. I followed them as they walked half a block to his car. She got in. He walked around to the driver's side, leaned in, and kissed her. Not on the cheek. It wasn't a goodbye kiss. I stood there, completely frozen. My fingers went numb. I stopped recording, saved the video, and put the phone back in my pocket. My first instinct was to walk up to the car and bang on the window. But I didn't. I turned around and walked back to my car, drove home in silence, and sat in the driveway with the engine running. The whole ride home, I couldn't stop thinking about the look on her face when she was with him. She was relaxed, happy, like someone who didn't have anything weighing her down. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the car feeling like the dumbest man alive. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I didn't have the energy. My hands were trembling. That night, she came home just after 7. She walked into the kitchen, kissed me on the cheek like nothing happened, and started talking about how stressful her day had been. I stood by the sink, watching her move around, open a bottle of wine, pull plates from the cabinet, act like everything was fine. I didn't say a word. She paused and looked at me. "You okay?" she asked. I stared at her for a second. "Yeah, just tired." She nodded, gave me a quick smile, and went back to slicing vegetables. I stared at her hands. The same hands that had been on his shoulder, gripping his shirt while he kissed her. The same woman who had laughed in his car just hours before. She didn't even flinch. That was the part that broke me, the ease. The comfort. Like she wasn't hiding anything, because she didn't care if I found out. That night, while she showered, I watched the video again. I studied her face like I didn't know her. I wanted to understand what she was thinking, why she was doing this, why she didn't even try to cover it up. But the more I watched, the more I realized there was nothing to understand. She'd moved on, and I was just now catching up. 2 days later, I finally snapped. I had spent every waking hour thinking about that kiss, that smirk on her face, that moment where she leaned into him like he was something worth leaning into. The video played in my head even when I closed my eyes, even when I tried to focus on work or walk the dogs or do anything normal. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every part of me boiled quietly, like something building up inside that couldn't be contained. So I waited for her to come home from work, made sure I was sitting at the dining table, lights on, no distractions. I wanted her to see me, wanted her to walk into the room and realize something was off before I even said a word. When she walked in, she was humming. That made it worse. She dropped her bag by the door, took off her heels, and walked into the kitchen like she hadn't just spent her afternoon wrapped around some other guy. I didn't speak right away. I waited until she opened the fridge and pulled out a bottle of wine. "Who is he?" I said, my voice flat and controlled. She froze for half a second, then turned her head slightly. "What?" I stood up and walked around the table. "Don't play dumb. I saw you. I have the video. I know about the condo. I know about the guy." Her hand tightened around the neck of the bottle. She didn't move, just stood there with her back to me. "Say something," I said. "At least have the guts to speak." She turned around slowly, her face unreadable. "If you were spying on me, then you already know everything." I blinked. "That's what you're opening with." She shrugged, walked to the counter, grabbed a glass, and poured the wine like we were discussing a movie I didn't enjoy. "I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah, I've been seeing someone. You want to know who he is? His name's Kyle. He works in strategy at my firm. We started talking at a team offsite 3 months ago. It got more serious last month." "Is that what you want to hear?" I stepped closer, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why? What did I do to deserve this?" She finally looked up, eyes locked on mine. "Nothing. That's the problem." I stared at her, not understanding. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means you were always safe, Matt. Predictable. Kind. You'd ask how my day was, rub my back when I had headaches, Send me texts when you knew I was stressed. You did everything right, and somehow, it still didn't feel like enough. So it's my fault. She took a long sip of wine, then sat down on the stool at the island. It's not about fault. It's about what I want. I want passion. I want someone who makes me feel alive, not someone who folds my laundry while listening to podcasts. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you throw away 8 years for some guy you barely know because he made you feel alive? She nodded, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I'm not sorry it happened. I'm sorry you found out like this, but I'm not going to apologize for wanting more. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing stopping me from screaming. You're unbelievable. You cheat. You lie, and now you're standing here acting like I should just nod and move on. I'm not acting like anything, she said. You want a scene? Fine. I'll give you one. She slammed the glass down and walked up to me, eyes wide. You want to know why I stopped sleeping with you? Because you made it feel like a routine. You stopped trying. You made everything about comfort and habit, like we were roommates who occasionally touched each other. I needed more, and Kyle gave it to me. Then go to him, I snapped. Get your things and go to him. I already have, she said, almost smiling. I stayed with him last weekend. I told you I was at my sister's. You remember that? You texted me some sweet message about missing me. We laughed about that while he was. Well, you can imagine the rest. Something inside me cracked. I didn't hit her. I didn't throw anything. But I walked over to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the ring I had taken off the night I saw her with him, and tossed it on the floor at her feet. You disgust me, I said. She didn't flinch. She bent down, picked up the ring, looked at it for a second, then put it on the counter. I'll pack my things tomorrow, she said. But I'm not going to beg for forgiveness. If you want a divorce, I'll sign the papers. If you want to pretend this didn't happen and go back to your comfortable little world, then I'll stay. But I'm not going to apologize for being honest now. There's no going back, I said, my voice shaking. You killed that version of us the moment you let him touch you. She nodded like she already knew that. Then she walked to the bedroom without another word. I stood there in the kitchen, hands clenched so tight my knuckles went white, staring at the wine glass she left behind. It was still half full. I dumped it in the sink and watched it swirl down the drain. It was the only thing I could control that night. After that night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room until the sun came up, still wearing the same clothes, still staring at the same wall, going over every word she said. I kept playing it back, trying to decide if there was anything I missed, any clue that could have warned me. But there wasn't. Not really. I had been too trusting. I had been exactly the kind of man she described. Comfortable, predictable, dependable. I had built a life around being that man because I thought that's what people were supposed to do when they loved someone. Turns out, all I was doing was giving her a safe place to cheat in peace. She didn't leave the next morning like she said she would. She took a day off work, stayed in the guest room, avoided me completely, like she was the victim here. At noon, she came out for coffee, didn't even look at me, just walked past like nothing had happened. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to let her walk away clean. She thought she could cheat on me, tell me I wasn't enough, and then casually move on like this was some amicable breakup. No, she wanted honesty. She was about to get the rawest version of it. I didn't yell or scream or throw anything at her. That would have been satisfying in the moment, but pointless. Instead, I got organized. I started pulling together every shred of information I had. The video, the location logs, screenshots of her messages that I recovered from her sync tablet, anything that could prove what she had done. I sent it all to a secure drive, labeled it clearly, and made a backup. I wasn't going to confront Kyle. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. What I was going to do was burn every bit of fake respect she had left. She was always obsessed with her image, always careful about what people thought of her. At work, she acted like the poster child for self-discipline and professionalism. Everyone thought she was this focused, strong woman who had her life in perfect order. So I sent the video and screenshots to her boss. Just the facts. No commentary. No threats. I included timestamps, explanations of where it was taken, and mentioned that it happened during work hours. I wasn't sure if it would ruin her job or not, but I knew it would punch a hole in that perfect mask she wore every day. That was only step one. Next, I printed everything. Every picture, every message, every location ping, everything she had ever deleted and thought was gone for good. I bought a simple folder, packed it neatly, and delivered it by hand to her parents' house. They always saw me as the boring husband who couldn't keep up with their ambitious daughter. Fine. Let them see what their little success story was really doing while I was making dinner and folding her laundry. I didn't ring the bell. I just dropped it in the mailbox and drove off. Then I contacted our financial advisor. We'd been planning to consolidate some investments into a joint account, but that wasn't going to happen anymore. I had already transferred my half into a new account under my name. The advisor tried to play neutral at first, but once I explained what happened and why I needed separation fast, his tone shifted. He offered to expedite the paperwork. I told him I'd be filing for divorce that week and needed all assets reviewed and documented. He agreed to prep everything by Monday. When I got home that night, she was sitting at the table eating leftovers like nothing had changed. I walked past her without saying a word, printed out the draft divorce papers, and left them on the table. She glanced at them, then looked up at me. "So that's it?" she asked, like I hadn't given her a dozen chances to back out before she blew it all up. "That's it," I said. She shook her head. "You're being petty. You could have talked to me." "I did talk to you," I said. "You just decided I wasn't enough. So now I'm making sure you know what enough looks like when it walks out the door." She stood up, anger rising. "You think this makes you strong? Sending my boss that stuff? Going to my parents?" "I think it makes me honest," I said. "You said you wanted honesty. You wanted to feel something real. So here it is. This is real. This is what happens when you treat someone like garbage and expect them to stay quiet. You'll regret this," she snapped. I didn't even blink. "Not as much as you'll regret me finally doing something for myself." She stormed back to the guest room and slammed the door. I sat back down at the same table where I had found out I wasn't enough and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. There was no going back. The old version of me, the one who tried to be everything for her, that man was gone. What replaced him wasn't bitter or broken. He was awake, and he had no more time for people who only valued him when it was convenient. She stayed in the guest room for the next 3 days. We barely crossed paths except in the hallway or kitchen, and even then, we didn't say anything. I was done with pretending. She, on the other hand, looked like she was still trying to figure out how to spin this in her favor. On the 4th evening, I came home to find her sitting at the dining table, divorce papers laid out in front of her. She had a pen in her hand, but hadn't signed anything. I didn't ask her why she hadn't signed yet. I just put my keys on the counter and sat across from her, waiting. She didn't speak at first, just looked at me like she was trying to read my face, maybe looking for some weakness or hesitation. When she realized I wasn't going to speak first, she sighed and pushed the papers slightly toward me. "I've read everything," she said. "Your lawyer is thorough." I didn't respond. She picked up the pen, spun it between her fingers a few times, then set it down again. "So that's it, huh?" she said. "We're just done." "We've been done," I said. "You just didn't notice." She narrowed her eyes a little. "Don't act like I'm the only one who made mistakes. You think sitting around working from home and doing chores made you a perfect husband. I never claimed to be perfect," I said. "But I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't take our marriage and turn it into some side project while I entertained myself with someone else." "You did." She shook her head, frustrated. "You're still not hearing me. I tried to talk to you for years. You'd nod, you'd say all the right things, and then go right back to being distant." "I was distant because I thought I was being respectful," I said. "I gave you space when you needed it. I never controlled you. I never told you who you could talk to or where you could go. That's not distance. That's trust. And you used that to cheat." "That's not why I did it," she said quickly, then looked down, her voice quieter. "I just didn't feel like I mattered anymore." I leaned forward. "So instead of talking to me, you ran to some guy who made you feel special for a few minutes at a time? And you thought I'd just accept that?" "I didn't plan for this to happen," she said. "Kyle and I started talking, and it felt nice. It felt like someone actually cared about how I was feeling for once." "And now?" I asked. "Are you staying with him?" She hesitated. "We've talked. He wants to keep seeing me. I don't know yet." I laughed once. "Unbelievable. You destroyed our marriage and you're still undecided." "Because this isn't easy, Matt," she said, raising her voice. "You think this is fun for me? You think I don't feel like shit waking up in the house I cheated in? You think I'm proud of what I did? Proud or not, you did it," I said. "And you made it worse by blaming me for it." "I blamed you because I was hurt," she said. I was alone in this relationship long before Kyle came along. Then you should have left, I said. You had every opportunity. Instead, you stayed, pretended, and lied to my face. She rubbed her hands together like she was trying to wipe something off them. I didn't know how to leave. I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to be the one who gave up. You didn't give up, I said. You just kept me around for convenience. You used me as your emotional punching bag until someone else gave you attention. Then you lashed on like nothing mattered. I was unhappy, she said, quieter now. So was I said. But I didn't go looking for someone else to fix it. We sat there in silence for a long time. Just the two of us with the stack of papers between us and years of resentment hanging in the air. Eventually, she picked up the pen again and signed. Her name looked rushed, sloppy, like she couldn't get it over with fast enough. She pushed the papers across the table and stood up. I'll move out by the end of the week, she said. I nodded. She walked to the hallway, then stopped and looked back. Do you still hate me? I thought about it. Not for long. I don't think I hate you. I think I just stopped caring. And that might be worse. She stood there for another second, like she wanted to say something else, then turned and walked away. I sat there staring at her signature. The final act in a story that should have ended differently. But it didn't. And now, I had to figure out what the rest of my life was going to look like without her in it. She left 2 days earlier than she said she would. I came back from the store and found the house quieter than usual, a few drawers left half open, and the guest room stripped bare. Her shoes were gone, her toiletries, the clothes from the hallway closet she always said she didn't care about, but refused to throw out. I walked from room to room just to confirm she was really gone. There was no note, no text, no goodbye. It was just done. I stood in the hallway for a while, not knowing what I was supposed to feel, and eventually sat on the couch and looked around like I was seeing the place for the first time. The silence wasn't peaceful or painful, it was just there. I thought about calling someone, maybe my brother or one of my old friends I hadn't seen in months, but I didn't want to explain anything. I didn't want sympathy or advice. I just wanted to be left alone, and for once, I didn't feel guilty about it. The paperwork had already been submitted. My lawyer confirmed everything was in motion. She didn't contest anything, probably because she knew she didn't have any ground to stand on. We'd split the assets evenly, and I'd keep the house. I didn't even care about the money or the car. I just didn't want to be around her anymore. A week passed before I saw her again. She asked to meet at a coffee shop near her new place. I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. I needed to see what she looked like now that the mask was off, and we didn't have to pretend anymore. When I walked in, she was already there, sipping some overpriced latte and looking out the window like she was expecting someone else. When she saw me, she gave a small wave and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat down. I almost didn't. I know, she said, stirring her drink. But I thought we should talk one last time. Without fighting. There's not much left to say. She nodded slowly. I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Not for leaving, but for how I did it. I handled it wrong. I should have been honest earlier. I leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. You didn't just handle it wrong. You disrespected me, you blamed me, and then you rubbed it in my face. That's more than just a communication problem. I was scared, she said. I felt trapped, and I didn't know how to deal with it. You could have said that. You could have left with some decency. But instead, you made me feel like everything that went wrong was my fault, like I was the one who wasn't good enough to keep you happy. She didn't argue. For once, she just listened. I'm not going to pretend I was perfect, I continued. I know I got quiet. I know I got stuck in routines. But I thought we were building something that didn't need drama to survive. I thought we had something solid. So did I, she said. But then I started feeling like I was just going through the motions. Like I was living someone else's idea of a good life. And I didn't want that anymore. So you blew it up instead of fixing it. Maybe, she said. But at least now we're free to find something that actually works. I shook my head, not in anger, but in disbelief. You really believe that, don't you? That this was about you finding yourself or some noble version of happiness? She stared at her cup and didn't answer. I tried, I said. I gave everything I had to make this work. And yeah, maybe I wasn't the most exciting guy in the world, but I showed up every day. I stayed loyal. I loved you even when I wasn't sure you deserved it. She looked up. I know. That's what makes this hard. I stood up. No. What makes this hard is realizing I wasted years on someone who didn't know how to value what she had until she lost it. She didn't stop me from leaving. She just sat there, probably rehearsing her next version of this story for someone else. I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. There was no point. That chapter was closed. I went home, took down the framed pictures, threw the last of her things into a box, and dropped it off outside her apartment door. I didn't knock. I didn't text. I just walked away. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. I started sleeping through the night again. I started waking up without that heavy feeling in my chest. I cleaned the house, rearranged the furniture, deleted old messages, unsubscribed from things we used to do together. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to keep up with someone's expectations or chasing a version of love that didn't want me. It's not some dramatic transformation or sudden happiness. I still get angry sometimes. I still think about what could have been if she'd just said something, if she'd chosen honesty over betrayal. But those moments pass faster now. And when they do, I remind myself that staying loyal to the wrong person is worse than being alone. At least now, I can hear my own thoughts. At least now, I get to decide what happens next. So yeah, she's gone. The marriage is over. But I'm still here. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not waiting for someone else to save me. I'm just living. Quietly. Honestly. On my own terms. And maybe that's enough.